Okay, so how do I just go to the next one?
Right, left, right, left.
Okay. Right.
You can make yourself bigger as well.
No, it's okay.
Huh?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, we can put a microphone there.
The mic, oh, you need a microphone as well. Okay. So the last thing we stopped at was whether or not Rabbim can be mevatel a mechitza. So obviously, if the mechitza is an actual wall, just people walk over it, the Rabbim can't be mevatel it. We're going to discuss did you get a picture of the 9 Mile Trail, the bridge there? So, okay, we'll see. We're going to discuss later on situations where it's possible that a Rabbim can mess up a mechitza. But generally speaking, the one that they can be, the Rabbim can actually be mevatel, is the classic example is a case where you don't even really have a mechitza. There's something called pasei birois, which means that in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, they had birois, water cisterns, where water was poured in to provide the public with water to feed their animals, and on Shabbos and on Yom Tov, they had to take the water out of the boyer, which was a Rishus HaYachid, and put it down in the Rishus HaRabbim, which is real Hoitzah. So the Chachamim were masakin around those boiros something called pasei birois. Pasim are boards. There were boards on the 4 corners, boards shaped like an L, 10 tefachim high, and 1 amma wide, and these boards made that area in between into a Rishus HaYachid, as long as the space between them was not too big. Problem was that this is not a real wall, it's a wall, but it's also like posts in the middle of a Rishus HaRabbim. If everybody's walking through there, then it doesn't really have the tzura of a wall. So Osi Rabbim umvatli mechitzas. So what they had to do was move the Rabbim around them. Another case would be if you have a Tzuras HaPesach going across a gate of a city and no actual gate. So all you have is a lechem mikan, v'kona al gabehem. It's a real Rishus HaRabbim. It doesn't count. So what you have to do instead is make a wall or a gate, as we mentioned, that is closed 1 night a year at least. Okay, natural boundaries. Okay. Okay, we can talk about Manhattan for a minute or two. There is a big shaila in the poskim. If you have, first of all, Manhattan itself, people want to say, Rab Mendel Kasher, who was the one who promoted this shitta, Rab Mendel Kasher was a very choshev Rav, a Ger Chassid, Talmud of the Rogatchover. He put out a lot of the Rogatchover's Torah. Rab Mendel Kasher held that Manhattan is a natural Rishus HaYachid because it has a side. It has steep sides that go down to the water, to the river, on all sides. Entire Manhattan could be considered a Rishus HaYachid. Problem is that there are Rishuyos HaRabbim, real Rishuyos HaRabbim, that break through those boundaries. The classic example would be the George Washington Bridge. The George Washington Bridge, you all know, is the busiest bridge in the world, and it has, I don't know how many, maybe 1 million people using it every day. It's a very, very busy bridge. And it runs right from one highway into another highway. There's a George Washington Bridge on the west side of Manhattan, and there's another bridge on the east side of Manhattan, and Route 80 pretty much runs straight through there. Route 80 is a road that is probably as Rishus HaRabbim as you can get. And the road goes through Manhattan in a straight line. If you don't get off the bridge, if you stay on the bridge, you go straight through in a very straight line across Manhattan on the George Washington Bridge. There are other bridges and other tunnels which are also very busy, among the busiest in the world, and therefore there's a big problem with using the island of Manhattan, counting it as a Rishus HaYachid, So you've got Rishuyas Harabim going right through it. There are mavrois throughout Manhattan that are mafulish to Rishus Harabim. Not only that, you can take one of the main roads running the north to south in Manhattan, such as what in the west side is West End Avenue. When you go a little bit further, Broadway bends and then straightens up again, and West End Avenue becomes Broadway. A little bit further south, West End Avenue becomes Amsterdam Avenue, and it's one long road, just with different names. And on that road itself, there's probably a few 100,000 people living in the apartment buildings, living and working in the apartment buildings and in the stores and offices on that road. Plus, you have the fact that it's being used by so many people all the time, and it's a straight line. It doesn't bend. Which brings up another issue. What is a Rishus Harabim min HaTorah if we say that you don't need 600,000 people? So as if the Rishus Harabim min HaTorah without 600,000 people is 16 amos wide. Let's say it's 25 feet. Go to Chumrah, it's 32 feet, actually becomes a kula. A lot of roads, a lot of streets in large cities are like that, are that wide. Now you don't count the places where people park, because now that they've parked there, the Rabbim can't get there. The Rabbim can't walk over there. So you wouldn't count the places where people park. But let's take, for example, Fifth Avenue in Oakland and Shadyside, which is where we're using Fifth Avenue for an Eruv, has about 4 lanes of traffic and nobody's allowed to park. So that would be L'cha'ira a Rishus Harabim. However, there's Machlekas Rishonim. There's a shitta of Rashi in the Rambam that in order for it to be a Rishus Harabim, it has to go through the city, Mishar L'shar, straight through the city from one gate to the other gate, from one gate on one side to a gate on the other side without bending. A very straight road. That's the way you'd make a road. If you're making a road, there's no reason not to make it straight. The only reason why roads are made curved is because the terrain is too steep to go straight up the mountain. So you have to go around. But if you build your city right, you choose the right location, you should not need to have to bend the road. It should be able to be a very straight road. Now, Yerushalayim is built on a mountain, but a lot of towns are built in very flat areas, and Manhattan's one of them. It's relatively flat, but certainly other places in America, you look at the maps, you'll see how straight the roads are. So, one thing that saves you from having a Rishus Harabim D'Oraisa, at least according to those shittas, is that it's not straight. The roads are not straight. And in Pittsburgh, Baruch Hashem, we can say that a lot of the roads that we're using are b'chlal, not straight roads. They curve, they bend at some point. And the theory is that if the road bends, a mavui okum, if the road bends, since it's a mavui okum, going up over here, you're going to hit the other end of it. The other end of it, the part where it bends, the houses there are considered like a wall. So you have houses going along one side, houses are going along the other side, and then when it turns, you have houses on that side as well. There's an opening on the side, but that saves it from being a real Rishus Harabim according to those shittas. So that would be one way to get around it. Another way, as we've mentioned before, is the fact that you need 600,000 people. Let's move on over here. Okay, let's talk a little.
How long does it have to go before it turns?
As long as it doesn't go through the city, it turns before going through the city. Now, I should add that there are a lot of shittas that a derech, me'ir le'ir, a road that goes from one city to another city, these rules don't apply. It can be a Rishus Harabim as well. It does need to have a lot of people using it, so it would have to be both cities are very populated cities, and then the derech would be considered a Rishus Harabim. Let's talk a little bit, I think we mentioned it earlier, some of the things that can come up in a, okay. Let's go through a few of the things that can come up in a city Eruv. Before we do that, let's talk before, what happens if the Eruv goes down on Shabbos? If it goes down during the week, not a problem. We fix it before Shabbos. What happens if it goes down on Shabbos? So we paskin that you're allowed to tell a guy to fix the Eruv. It's a malacha. It's tzorchei rabim, and Amir La'akum is a shvus. So Amir La'akum for tzorchei rabim, we can tell a guy to fix the Eruv. It's a major tzorchei rabim. And the only thing is that you have to get the guy. So we used to use a non-Jewish company to fix the Eruv, and I knew the number by heart from calling it very often. So I went to, the Eruv was once down. There was 2 days Rosh Hashanah and then a Shabbos. And the Eruv was checked on Tuesday so that anything that breaks, anything that was broken can be fixed by Wednesday. And then we had a good Eruv. What happened was, on Wednesday, there was a crash. The Eruv was going through Shenley Park at the time. There was a crash in Shenley Park. Somebody hit a pole, which probably was an Eruv pole. And somebody reported it to me. So the first day of Yom Tov, Thursday, I went to Tashlich. I went down the pony trail. On my way back, I passed by and I saw they'd fixed the pole, but the string was gone. So on my way back, I went over here on Hobart Street. Bobby Leibovitz had a non-Jewish maid working for him, and I told her to call this number, and I told her what to tell him. So like Amir da Amira, actually, it's like, and he fixed it. He fixed it, Baruch Hashem, before Shabbos. That's if you can do that. What if you can't? So first thing to know is that to be over on Hoitzah, you need an Akira and a Hanocha, which means that you have to pick it up from the Rishus HaYachid and put it down in the Rishus HaRabim. What if you pick it up from Rishus HaYachid and you walk through the Rishus HaRabim and you put it down in another Rishus HaYachid? So there's a whole shayla in the Gemara. First of all, if it has to be on two sides of the Rishus HaRabim, or if they're on the same side, is it the same? So it's dependent on a lot of limudim from what happened in the Mishkan, which I'm not even going to get into. But the bottom line is that if you don't have an Akira and a Hanocha, you weren't over on a De'iraisa. So the best thing to do if you find out that the Eruv is down and you're holding something is to continue walking, to turn around, go back to where you came from and put it back down. That's if you didn't stop walking. If you already stopped walking once, let's say for a light, then you already, according to many shittas, you did a hanocha, because hanochas gufoi is like a hanocha. When you stop, it's like doing a hanocha. So now you got a problem. You still would like to avoid being mavir dalad amas in Rishus HaRabim. The first time you did it, it was a shoygeg, maybe not even a shoygeg, a misaseh. But now you're holding it in your hand. You want to avoid being mavir dalad amas b'Rishus HaRabim. So the best thing is to find a makom patur, or if you can get to a Rishus HaYachid and drop it, do a hanocha kil achar yad. Or if worse comes to worse, do a hanocha kil achar yad in Rishus HaRabim as well. You're
moving while you drop.
Well, it's because you still dropped it. Yeah. So now there is a halacha. There's a whole perek about it. The beginning of a perek. What if you're walking in the outside in Rishus HaRabim and Shabbos comes in? So you can't carry your stuff any further. So the Gemara says the best thing to do is, in those days they had donkeys. Don't put your stuff on your donkey, because there's an Issa D'Oraisa to be mechamer achar behemtoi. You're not allowed to walk with your donkey doing work, or to make your donkey do work on Shabbos. That's also shvisas behemtoi. You're not allowed to let your donkey do the work for you. It's not chayav koros like a malacha, but it's a lav. But you can give it to a guy and let the guy take it. Let the guy carry it for you if you trust the guy. Or if you don't have a guy, so then the Gemara says you can have a cheresh or a shaita or a cotton, and each of those are different madregas of da'as. And a shaita is better than a cheresh because a cheresh has a bit more da'as than a shaita. You know what they are, cheresh and shaita, okay? So that's what you would have to do. There is one other heter of shnayim she'asu. Shnayim she'asu means that if you have two people doing a malacha that one person could do by himself, then they're not chayav. If you have two people doing a malacha that one person could have done by himself, they're not chayav. So I remember as a child seeing two girls taking out their little sister, their little brother must have been, on Shabbos, and he refused to continue walking. So what do you do? So they picked him up, the two of them together, and they carried him between them, a case of shnaim she'asu. Sorry. And that's the next best thing to do. So there are a lot of different things you can do. You can ask a cotton, you can ask, you can do shnaim she'asu, you can ask a goy. Probably in Pittsburgh, the safest thing is to ask a goy. So let's say a woman's pushing a stroller and someone finds, and she realizes the Eruv is down. She sees it in front of her. If you know the Eruv is down, and someone is walking, carrying without knowing that the Eruv is down, the best thing is not to tell him anything. And that way he'll just continue walking, get to where he gets, and it won't be an Akira and Hanacha, hopefully. But what if she sees the Eruv is down and she's got a stroller with her? Yeah, chai noiseyes, atzmai, there are various different things you can be mitzaref to be makel, but if she sees a guy right nearby, that's the best thing to do. She goes over to the guy and says, could you do me a favor? Could you push this stroller into that house? Find the nearest house and push the stroller into the nearest house, knock on the door and say, I'm sorry, I just realized the Eruv is down. Can I stay here till after Shabbos? And that's what you'd have to do. Okay. So here we have a picture of one of the strings. Okay, so what we do is to cut off all the Roshiyos Harabim, we have strings. So this string is going from, if you look on the left side of the picture, you see that signpost. So that you see it underneath the signpost, you see there's a pole holding it up. That pole comes out the top as well. You can just about see it. It's very hard to see, right near the corner over there. And on top of that pole, we have a string. And that string goes across the street, this is a ramp. It's a ramp going down to the parkway from Beechwood Boulevard. And if you're coming from the Greenfield Bridge on Beechwood Boulevard, it's the first ramp. And this string goes across the street and prevents you from being metaltal. It cuts off the Eruv, that's what it does. So the Eruv is not connected to the ramp, and now the ramp is outside the Eruv. You can't carry in the ramp, but that cuts off the Rosh Hashanah of the parkway.
Do we allow the string on top has to be visible?
I personally prefer that it's visible, because if it's not visible, then how can anybody tell? But no, you could probably, it's not going to be invisible. It's going to be visible. It's just very hard, like a fish line. Yeah, this string is quite thick. It looks small in the pictures, but okay. Here you have we're using a string going across to this pole over here, and this pole is connected to the cemetery fence. Actually, we're not using this anymore, I don't think, right? Now with the Greenfield expansion, we're not using this anymore, but we were. The Eruv came up Bigelow Street over there behind on the right side, came up Bigelow Street it would be the left side of Bigelow Street until the corner, till it hits this main road, which is called Hazelwood Avenue, I think. And then it crosses over at Bigelow and crosses over Bigelow to the other side of the street, goes along that side of the street for 3 poles, and then it comes across to this pole in front of you. This pole, we want to connect to the cemetery fence. Again, I mentioned last week that a cemetery is a kafaf shaloi hukaf ledira. Nobody lives in a cemetery, so you have to cut the cemetery out of the Eruv. We were using the cemetery fence as our outer boundary for the Eruv. We still are. And to connect the pole to the fence, we would have had to put up a very little tzuras HaPesach, which could very easily get broken by people doing the grass or whatever. So rather than doing that, we made the fence lovud. Lovud means when you have two things connected to each other, so they can either be one solid piece or two things next to each other touching, or it's a little space between them. And then halachah Moshe Sinai, you're allowed to have up to 3 tefachim between them, and it's still considered connected. So these poles are a few inches apart, about 6 inches apart, and they every now and again they bend, as you can see. But here is an example of, I mentioned to you last week how poles lean over. You can see how this pole is leaning over, very visibly leaning over. So that's an example of where we use lovud. We do it in one other place, also by a cemetery. I don't think we have a picture of that. Have a picture later on, okay. Here are a few examples of fixing the Eruv. So the Eruv is checked on Thursdays, and if we can fix it, we fix it. Here's a broken lechi. This is from today, I think, right? This is a broken lechi. You see the lechi that we're using is a piece of UV casing, ultraviolet protected casing, which the electric companies use anyway to conceal a ground wire. We use it with nothing inside it, and it goes straight up the pole. Here, a car crashed, you can see on the bottom, a car crashed into the pole and broke our lechi. Baruch Hashem, it's within reach for the people going to check the Eruv, and they have the materials with them, so they just pull off the broken piece and replace it. The next picture, in the middle, you have a string caught in a tree. So what happens is that these strings are quite long, and sometimes a tree, as it grows, when it first starts growing, it doesn't push the string. The string is very tight and very strong. So when it first starts growing, it doesn't push the tree until it reaches a certain stage of its growth, when it suddenly gets so heavy that the string no longer can hold it back, and then it pushes it a long way. When they cut it, the string comes back a long way. So here there's a string caught in a tree, reached the point where it's visibly pushed over, it's tangled, it's snagged, and it has to be cut. So you have to send someone up there he has to be able to reach it. Sometimes it's high and it needs a bucket truck. Sometimes a big pole is good enough. Here in the third picture, you have a branch that fell on a string. Now, sometimes it doesn't affect the Eruv because it fell vertically on the string and the string is still straight. But again, you don't want the string to get too low. Sometimes these are very long strings, and if you pull them down, if the middle of the string is within 10 tefachim of the ground, the whole Eruv is no good, because the string has to be more than 10 tefachim above the ground. So that best as much as possible, you get rid of the branch. It's possible there might be a little piece left hanging, and that won't affect the Eruv. Here on Center Avenue, there's on top, next to Chipotle, there's that big billboard, and every now and again, there's a very strong wind. Now you can see the pole that we're using is all the way on the right of that picture. It's not the traffic light pole, it's the next pole over. There's a string coming off that pole, and it goes all the way, it's a long string that goes to the top of the next pole. Sometimes the wind is very strong, and these strings are a little bit slack. They have to be a bit slack, otherwise they'd snap. And so when they get wet, they get even slacker, and it gets pulled up, blown in the wind, and it's caught. Okay, so let's just focus in on the pole. This is where the pole is. You can see, can you see the string coming off the pole now? It's coming off the pole, and it's going across. Huh? And there it's snagged on the billboard. And then it comes after the billboard and it continues along. The problem is that this snag it's a few feet away from where it should be. It should be much lower down. So when this happens, you have to go up there and remove the snag. Next picture. Okay, you see the difference. In this one, you see how far it is from the billboard. That's how far it was pushed over when it was snagged. Okay. Okay, a Karfaf, Frick Park, Shenley Park. Why are we allowed to use Frick and Shenley Park? The reason is because we built the Eruv connecting Frick Park to the buildings behind it. That's Beechwood Boulevard, or whatever it is over there. This is Somerset, I think. I think this is Somerset. So we connected. We're makif when you have a karfaf shloi hukaf ledira, you can be makif the karfaf to the dira. Makif means you make an enclosure. You enclose a living space in the karfaf. Then your karfaf is good. That's Frick Park and that's Shenley Park, the same thing.
Any parts inside there? No.
Most of Shenley Park is in the Eruv. Most of Shenley Park. I'm just trying to think which part is not. I think the whole of Shenley Park is in the Eruv. Oh, well, actually, one of the things in Shenley Park, you see this picture of Shenley Park over here. This is the pond below Phipps Conservatory. That's Phipps Conservatory, and this is the pond down below. You see, that's the bridge that goes across from Phipps to wherever. This is to Panther Hollow, and underneath there's a pond. That's the pond that when you go for Tashlich, you walk down the pony trail, and the pond and all those little rivers and things drain into this pond. So I walked around this pond to try and figure out whether this pond is a Beis Sasayim. It's very hard to tell. So what I did was I tried the water a little bit. The water it's very clean. The water is pretty clean, and you can drink it. And there are fishes that live in the pond as well, which is usually a sign that the pond is not polluted. So otherwise, we'd have a problem. The pond is not a place that people can live in. The only reason that we can use it is because people can drink the water. That's called living. But if people can go boating on it, I'm not sure that that's good enough. And if it's undrinkable water, which most ponds in most cities are, then it's considered a Beis Sasayim Shloi Hukaf Ledira. We would have to put a fence around it, and the drop from the edge of the pond to the pond is not 10 tefachim. Okay, this is it. Beis Sasayim Shloi Hukaf Ledira. Okay, next. Okay, so on Center Avenue, which is in the Eruv, a lot of it, a good part of Center Avenue is in the Eruv. On Center Avenue, there is a bus lane. The bus lane comes off Center Avenue. We don't need lechis on a lot of Center Avenue, on this part of Center Avenue, because we're using it. You can see in the background the bridge. That's Baum Avenue, is it? Baum Avenue? That's Baum Avenue. That's where the Eruv goes, along Baum Avenue. So we don't need strings along Center Avenue. However, here we have a movoi, the bus lane that's going out of Center Avenue, and it goes all over the place. And the bus lane is not all in the Eruv. So we cut off the bus lane. Here you see, make it bigger. On this end, you can't see it. Okay, it's very hard to see. We put a string to this pole. Then on the top of this pole, we go across here, you make it bigger. Here you see this string. This part in the blue you can't see very well, but when it hits the red, you see it. Goes across in front of the bus lane, goes across here to this traffic light. Then we have another string going from lower down on the traffic light to the fence. The fence is connected to the building, so we don't need anything else. That's the string cutting off the bus lane on Center Avenue. Okay, I can't see this. What happened there? I'm sorry.
How to sell lechi in the Rabbi town.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Right. How to solve a lechi omed al gabe tail. So okay. So generally speaking, we try. This is a big machlokes. There's a big machlokes hapoiskim whether or not you can have a lechi al gabe har or a lechi al gabe tail. What's the cheshbon? Cheshbon is like this. It's one thing if you have a solid wall going from one side of the street to the other side of the street. Then it doesn't matter whether the wall ends up, it doesn't matter where the wall ends up. But if you're using it, tzuras ha-pesach, a doorway, people don't make a doorway halfway up a mountain. You know, the door goes down to the ground. So is a lechi al gabe tail good? So there is one place in the Eruv where we are soymach on that shitta of lechi al gabe tail. It's a reliable shitta, but I try to avoid it as much as possible. So here we had, this is on Gladstone, I think it is. What's it called? Oh, Gladstone. Okay, on Gladstone Street, which is deep in Greenfield. Gladstone Street, we had to use that pole. Problem is that, as you can see on the bottom of that pole, there's a qualifiable, a valid tail. That would be good for a wall for an Eruv. It's a real tail. It's a steep slope. And the lechi doesn't go down to the ground. It goes down to the slope. So we continue the lechi, attach it to the mud, the clay that's at the bottom of that pole, and go down to the street level. Let's make it bigger that you can see. So there you see the lechi ends at the top of this very steep slope, the pole, and the lechi goes down to when the street becomes level. Can't see it behind there. Yeah. Okay. Okay. This is a fascinating situation. This is nobody holds that you can have a lechi mukaf mechitzas. You can't have it if your lechi of tzuras ha-pesach is surrounded by mechitzas. You don't have doorways like that. You don't wall off one side of a doorway. It doesn't happen. So lechi mukaf mechitzas is no good. So originally, when this part of the Eruv was built, they didn't have this fence around that pole. That pole was in the middle, and as you can see on the pole right now, you can see two lechis on the pole. The one on the right. Those are the original lechis before they built the fence. One day we come there and there's a fence there. So now both those lechis are mukaf mechitzas. So what do? So we got permission to put up against the outside of each of the fence, to put these 10 tefachim high pieces of, one of them is wood. This one is wood. And it's wide enough that if the string on top moves a bit, it's not going to make it, it's still going to be directly on top of the wood. And on this side, we're using a piece of plexiglass. You can see that behind there is a piece of plexiglass. Oh, where is it? Further up. There.
Why do you need that in the chain link fence? Doesn't count?
The chain link fence counts for the rest of the hekuf. So what we're doing is we're connecting both lechis to the chain link fence. So the chain link fence is part of our hekuf. That's oimid. That's pretty solid. And the string is going, I don't know if you can see it. You can't see the string.
Going over those things you installed.
The string is going over it, yeah.
Why does it not count for the string to go over the chain link fence?
Because the chain link fence is, okay. So there's another halacha that a lechi cannot be daled amas. If it's more than daled amas, it can't be called a lechi anymore. It's like a solid wall. So a lot of these fences, I don't know how, it's very hard to tell over here, but if it's 6 feet, it's already a problem of daled amas. So this is to avoid a lechi mukaf mechitzas, right? Okay, next. Okay, a break more than 10 amos with the gates closed at night. We spoke about that last week. Now, it happens to be there is also a string going across the top of those two gate posts. Those are kosher lechayim. They're less than 6 feet wide. They're probably about 2 or 3 feet wide, maybe 4 feet, but they're less than 6. They're less than 4 amos. And the gate is more than 10 amos, but the gate is closed at night. So really, we don't need that string. They have to close this gate at night. I spoke to the people who run the park because it's not safe for people to get in there at night. This one is not as machmir as the one in the Calvary Cemetery in Greenfield. They're very machmir. Okay, this is a case. This is a cemetery it's called Allegheny Cemetery. Allegheny Cemetery is one of the oldest cemeteries here. And it's right next to next door to Children's Hospital. Sorry. There are 2 cemeteries next to each other. One is St. Mary's, which is owned by the same people as Calvary, and one is Allegheny Cemetery, which is owned by the same people as the Homestead Cemetery, the Homewood Cemetery. So here we have, if you look at the picture, a lechi on this side of the pole, going across the street. On this side of the pole, we have another gap. So here we put 3 10-tefachim pieces of pole with a little bit of yellow tape on the top that you can tell them easily. And they connect between the pole and they make the pole lowered to the cemetery fence, and then we have the cemetery fence. What's this a picture of? Okay. So this is, Commercial Street. There's a string going up. Do you have a picture of the fences on the parkway? You don't have. Okay. Can you see the string in this picture? No. Okay. Commercial Street. We use the bank of 9 Mile Run right near its mouth, very near its mouth. We use that bank all the way up till the Irish Center, and then we cross over and start using some poles, go from a tree to some poles. We use some poles, and then we take a string going up the hill to get to the fence that goes along the parkway. You might not notice it if you're not looking for it, but along any part of the parkway that has a hill next to it, not any part, a lot of it has a fence going along. And we use that fence to cut out the parkway. If we can, we use a steep cliff, a hill. But if we can't, we use the fence. And there's a string going from the bottom of Commercial coming up here and ending up at the fence at the top. What you're looking at is the part of the parkway that goes towards the Squirrel Hill Tunnel from Monroeville end, from Edgewood, and you're actually looking at the bridge. This is the bridge that's going to be replaced in a year or whenever. Fern Hollow Bridge. So when Fern Hollow Bridge collapsed, the #1, the very first week, we were 100% good. I don't know if anybody remembers, it's Mamash and Nace, that the bridge actually collapsed. As you can see, the 4 pieces of deck came down. The 4 pieces of deck landed in the ravine with the steep sides of the ravine on either side of them. So the ravine itself served as a wall, and the 4 pieces of the deck from this side that we're looking at, rather than from the other side where the bus is, from this side, the deck landed on the ground. The other side, as you can see, it folded upwards a bit, so it's not actually touching the ground. But on this side, the deck was touching the ground on all the way along. This is a funny picture. It's probably taken from the air, so it's not a perfect, but the deck was, maybe not. I don't know where this picture was taken, but the deck had a 12-foot piece of girder holding up the deck. That whole 12-foot piece of girder became a solid wall going across the ravine. So that first Shabbos was great. Then they started doing construction and moving it. Okay, here you're seeing. This is the other side. This is where there is. Yeah, this is already where they've already started moving it as well, I think. Okay, the bridge is part of the Eruv. The Eruv goes along Forbes Avenue and across Fern Hollow Bridge. We're using the bottom of the bridge as a Tzuras HaPesach to cut off outside of it, to cut off in this picture, the south part of it. And we're using we're cutting off the north part of it, okay? There, where the green arrow is, that's outside the Eruv. We're using the bottom of the bridge to make a Tzuras HaPesach there. And we're using the top of the bridge to include the whole of Forbes Avenue as part of the Eruv. So, okay, this is nice pictures. Okay. So this is when they actually start, what you're seeing over here is the new bridge. We had to build a temporary, while we could use the sides of the ravine till the bottom, but we had to cut off, we had to make something across the bottom. So they removed the deck. They removed all the garbage. That was done, that was gone in a week. In the meantime, they compromised the slope. If you take a look at the picture, you look over here, the slope coming down from the bridge over here was not steep enough initially. Move it up. So they had to make an access ramp. So we had to go further back, and we were able to use the cemetery wall until the edge of the ravine. We could use the ravine until the flat part in the middle. What do you do then? So we had to make, they made construction fencing, cutting off the path and cutting off the whole area that nobody should be allowed in. Of course, people still tried when they were gone. People rode their bikes right through it. And this construction netting is actually more than 10 tfachim. It's probably about 15 tfachim. But every week we had to come and check it. Sometimes it was down. Eventually, we put a Tzuras HaPesach across this piece in the middle. But where's the water? Further on? Okay. So here we're on the bridge with some of the very helpful people. This is Rabbi Eli Wolanski with one of the people in charge of the swank. I've forgotten what his name is, this Greg or Doug. Okay. Here you see, now there's a problem if you have a mechitza going over water. A mechitza going over water, everyone agrees that it can't just go straight over the top. I shouldn't say everyone. There's one shitta in the Tanoim, one of the Tanoim holds that the mechitza can just go from one bank to the other bank and doesn't have to go down at all. However, we don't hold like that. The mechitza does have to go down, and if possible, it should go down into the water to be able to, that's the shitta that we really hold like. The mechitza should go into the water. So here, there is a creek over there, obviously, Fern Hollow, Fern, whatever the creek is called. That's the creek there. Now, a fascinating detail. The poskim say that a Tzuras HaPesach may go over water, but not a mechitza. A Tzuras HaPesach doesn't have to be solid, and people can walk through the Tzuras HaPesach. It's made for people walking through, and people can walk in the water. There's a shaila in Shabbos and halacha, whether or not you should stretch your feet over the water or walk into the water or whatever, but you can. So Tzuras HaPesach over water is okay. Right now, the bridge that you see in the background, we have a Tzuras HaPesach. We're using one of the girders on top. We have poles lashed. Do you have a picture of it? No. We have poles attached to the bridge, to the piles holding up the girders, because the piles themselves, as you can see, don't go all the way up to the girders. There's a little bit they move outwards. So we have a lechi underneath, and we're yotze with the Tzuras HaPesach, even though it's going over water in the middle. I tried to get them to cover the water with a culvert, they didn't do it. It wasn't in the plan, and they couldn't do it for us. But Atzuras HaPesach over Mayim is okay. But a fence, a mechitza over Mayim is not. So the mechitza has to be pulled down. So I think here you see, who's this, Chaim? Or Rabbi Admon? Might be Chaim. So here you see the mechitza over the water. We pulled it down. Okay, you can't see this. We actually pulled it down with rocks and held it down in the water to make sure that it was in the water. Okay, now, this is a complicated situation. At the top end, at the Braddock end of the bridge, we were using, before they finished the bridge, it was not that hard for us. We were using that gate that you see as that gate. We were using that as part of our Eruv. That attached to this wall. This wall was pretty much solid. Well, you can't see the other side of it. And there was another gate closing off the next area, and that was attached to a solid wall. What happened over here was they started moving things around. We no longer had a contiguous, they had to move that gate. It kept falling down. I think you picked it up a few times, right? Kept falling down. So we had to really be on top of things. This was this was trouble whenever we were there. In the end, what you're looking at right now, that we actually were able to use, we were able to convince them not to fill in. This is a sewer. They built the sewer. They were going to fill all this space in from the ground line over there. They were going to fill that all in on Shabbos. We convinced them to wait until Monday, and then we used the sheer wall of that sewer, of that digging that they had made, which was kosher to be used for an Eruv, to connect to here. So even though people kept pulling down that gate, we weren't that worried. What was going on here? We decided to cut a piece of this fence to use somewhere else. We needed to put more, we needed to add to the, we cut a piece of redundant fence to extend the mechitza over the water. And what's the other picture? I don't know. Okay. Something else. Okay, this is back to the same thing. We had to use the sharp, when the dugout part before they filled it in. All in the bridge. Okay. Is there anything more? That's it.
I walk to Children's Hospital in Chinese.
Okay.
It's not a slide.
It's you have the map. You have the full map. I'll find it. Okay, so if you need to walk to a hospital on Shabbos, you need to know which streets are in and which streets are out of the Eruv here. Okay.
Why don't you just go to the Eruv website?
Oh, this is good. This is good. Okay, so I'll tell you what these streets are. The orange thing up there in the top is Children's Hospital. The whole Children's Hospital is in there. Is in the Eruv. Even though when we drew the map, we just couldn't, the only thing we could do is make lines. It was much harder to make curved pieces. But the whole Children's Hospital is in the Eruv. The cemeteries, which is the green next to it, are out the Eruv. The line that you're seeing in front of the cemetery is Penn Avenue. The street going up in the middle there is Friendship Avenue. Penn Avenue, you could go, if you can get to Penn Avenue, you have to make sure that you don't go too far over here. Trying to remember the name of, this is Negley. This is Negley. No, sorry. Negley is here in the middle. Negley goes around behind here to Baum. So you can go along Negley, but you have to make sure to stay on the, if you're going up Negley, you have to make sure to stay on the left side of Negley. Otherwise, you might be going behind the Eruv. Better not to go on Negley, better to go on, what is this one? This is, what's it called? Aiken. Better to go on Aiken, but don't stay on Aiken. If you notice, Aiken takes a turn to the. Oh, this moves. Okay, this is good. This is good. That was good. What are you doing? The mouse moves. Okay, that was good. What you're doing was good. Okay, here, we'll use the mouse. Okay, so again, so this is Aiken. Aiken is okay until here. Then Aiken over here goes up and out of the Eruv. You don't want to do that. So you can take Aiken, you can go, the easiest way is to go up Whiteman, go up Whiteman, go up Whiteman until you get to Beeler. This is Whiteman, or this is Whiteman, maybe. One of these is Whiteman. I think this is Whiteman. You get to Beeler, you get to Wilkins. You know,
You have to share. Can't see on the. Like this, maybe.
Okay. Okay. Very good. So you go up Whiteman. Murray Whiteman. This is Whiteman. Yeah, this is Whiteman. Here's Whiteman. You go up Whiteman over here. You get to Wilkins. You continue on Wilkins until you get to Fifth. Turn back up Fifth, go to South Aiken. When you get to Liberty, Aiken sort of splits, and Aiken and Liberty. So you can go on Liberty, but just realize that when you get to this part of Liberty, you're now going to be, the Eruv is only on one side of Liberty. So what you're better off doing is going over, when you get to West Penn, going over from Liberty on Gross Street and going up Friendship. If you go up Friendship, you're well within the Eruv up until the entrance to Children's. Okay? The whole of Children's is in, even though this part over here, where the little hand is, looks like it's out of the Eruv. That's really in the Eruv because we're using the cemetery wall. This building is not Nagar anyway. It's hardly used. If you're visiting children, you're not going into this building. This building is used for administration and electric. As you see, the Eruv goes around the back of Children's Hospital and comes out over here. You can go on any of these streets. If you go on Main Street, you will be probably, well, depends. Most of the sidewalk, you'll be in the Eruv, but it's not a good idea. It's better to be on Friendship. You could go on Main, you could go on Liberty. If you can see the Eruv, it's very visible. You could go that route as well. But then if you want to go on, you can go on Liberty, back to South Aiken, and back to Wilkins. That's the best way to go. You could also go on Negley, as I said, but you've got to be careful when you get to this part of Negley. And at this point, you're probably better off going down center. Because Baum is only half in. The string that you see over here at Baum goes on the wrong side of Baum for you. Okay? Anything else I should be talking about? I'll just show you where the colleges are while we're here. You see all the hospitals are in. That was Children's. This is West Penn over here, sorry. West Penn Hospital. This is Shadyside Hospital. All these things, parts of Shadyside. Going this way, this is the VA. The VA hospital is here. This is UPMC, Presby, Montefiore. And this is McGee. If you go to McGee, let's talk about McGee. It's very good now. You can walk on Panther Hollow. You can go into the park, and you can walk along Panther Hollow from Hobart Street. And when you get to this point where there's a bridge, The bridge is closed. So it's only pedestrians. You can stay on that road, basically Beechwood Boulevard of the Allies. And then when you get to this street, I think it's called Halkett Street, you should go up Halkett Street and go into the hospital this way, over here. Preferably don't go around the back of McGee, because the Eruv does go along that sidewalk, but you might step out of the Eruv. We don't want that to happen. So don't go around the back of McGee, go to the front of McGee. That's the easiest way to go. If you want, you can go regular on Forbes Avenue. You can go Murray to Forbes and walk straight down Forbes and then go this way, but don't go past there. The Eruv crosses over, cuts off over there. That's if you're going to McGee. Going anywhere else? Chabad House. Chabad House is over. Find it over here. Huh? Which one?
I can.
No, not that one. What's his name? Shmuel Weinstein. Let's find it. It's not Carlo. I know where it is. It's over here. Huh?
No.
Yeah.
Wallingford?
Here it is, Wallingford. There's the Chabad house on Wallingford Street. See it there? Chabad house on campus, Pittsburgh. So if you're going there, the Eruv ends up here on that Center Avenue. So just be careful on Center Avenue. It's a bit crazy over there. The Eruv goes back and forth across Center Avenue a few different ways, messes around a little bit. So you don't want to go on Center Avenue. You go to Wallingford. Then the other Chabad house is well in the Eruv, one by CMU. It used to be, the CMU one used to be on the edge of the old Eruv. Wheeler, yeah. So it used to be, the Eruv used to go along Forbes Avenue by the CMU soccer field, cross over onto Beeler, and it was on that side of Beeler. They don't have it written here. Chabad house is about here, one of these houses. Don't know, why isn't it on there? Okay. Anything else? Any questions? I'll talk for a moment about expanding the Eruv to include private houses. So we have one of those, used to be, now it's all completely inside in Greenfield. But one of those was over here in Greenfield. So here you see the old map and the new map. So the old map can't see this. There's the corner, this piece over here, this square piece on the corner. There's a house, right? This used to be outside the Eruv. The Eruv was inside that right angle. There's a house just outside that right angle, Bal Yasni. And they wanted to be in the Eruv. So they had to pay to have poles and strings made so that it could extend the Eruv basically from this string into their house. That was one example. There's a few other examples. There were a couple on Wilkins Avenue when Wilkins was the edge of the Eruv, those kinds of things. Anything else we should show?
New school building there.
Yes, so the new school, this is the new Eruv over here. So the new school building is here. This is where the new school building is. It hasn't been added to the map yet. But this over here, across from the Capizzuto's Pizza, that gray thing is the new school building. Okay, so that's in the Eruv. Lydia Street. Yeah. Which Bigelow? Bigelow used to be the boundary of the Eruv, this part of Bigelow.
But now
Now it's inside the Eruv. Now we take the Eruv, we're using the cemetery fence, Calvary, until there. And then we go across and we use a steep hill between Indus Street and Prescott Street. There's a hillside that goes up to that ball field. So a ballpark, Gladstone Field. Then we use the fence of the Gladstone Field. We actually have a string going across over there that has to be checked. And then we have a couple of strings, and then we use a hillside over there as well. This is all hillside. It's very, and maybe we should have taken a picture of those strings going across from the ballpark to the hill. Okay. Then we use this hill, and this hill goes around until in the middle of Gladstone Street, we have to cross over from one side to the other. So we cross over, we go down a little bit here, still the hillside, and then over here, this is solid hill. There actually used to be a street going down here, which doesn't exist anymore. It's a path, right? It's a path. Sylvan Avenue. Sylvan Avenue continued all the way along here, but it's been closed off. It's a path. But on the right side and the left side of this thing, there is a steep hill. That goes all the way up to here. This street is a crazy street. Waldeck Street, anybody tried to drive down it? Yeah. You had to stop a few times. It's a crazy street. It's like, it's a very steep hill. And then it has this hairpin bend in the middle. You have to avoid hitting the wall, even if you're going slow, scratching yourself. So it's very steep. And the easier way to go from the end of Bigelow to Greenfield is over here. The steps. That's the easier way to go instead of going down Waldeck Street and Sylvan Avenue. What we do is we use this hill, and there's a steep hill. The line is not exact. The hill actually goes between Sylvan Avenue and Greenfield Avenue, and it goes down to here where we have strings going across. Do you have a picture of that? No. You didn't take a picture of Fraser Street, no. Strings going to attached to a fence on the bridge. And under the bridge, we're also using, under Fraser Bridge, which, by the way, is another bridge that's probably going to get, huh?
I meant to put it in.
Yeah, so under there, we're using the pylons and the girders as a natural Tzuras HaPesach, as a pre-made Tzuras HaPesach, except at the two ends, there's no, well, first of all, the pylons are on very strong bases, so we had to measure them to make sure that they weren't 4 amos. Otherwise, we'd have a problem. It's a lechi that's more than 4 amos. But at the ends, we don't have a lechi. So we had to put our own lechi up. The problem is that the way the bridge is made, it comes out, it sticks out a little bit, just under the bridge deck itself. There's a piece sticking out. So putting a lechi straight up the wall, it wouldn't go to it wouldn't hit the girder on top. So the only way to do it was to make a lechi bending out, like you see this, Mike. We had to put a lechi on the wall and bend it out, come out like at a slant and then straighten again, so that it would be under the girder. We didn't go all the way up. We used a spirit level, a laser level, to make sure that it's directly underneath. At both ends, we had to do that. The other end also, there's like this UPMC parking lot. You can't see it here. Okay, we go right under the parkway. We want to keep the parkway out. You can't see anything here. Okay, wait a second. Okay. This is through, yeah, there's a parking. We decided not to go this route. That's the route we went. And as you see, we're using that we're cutting out the parkway. Okay, so you can't go past this area. Naylor Street used to be out of the Eruv. We put it in the Eruv. We have some creative ways. The parkway is automatically cut off almost all the way along with fences. And Parker goes over this area a few different places. In a few different places, it goes over people's houses and streets. So we just cut it out. And all the way at the end over here, all the way at the end of Celine, right over here, we have a string past when there's no more road anymore. We have a string going from the fence of the parkway over here to the fence of the parkway over there. Probably where the white thing is. It's probably where the white.
After the station. Because you're cutting out the parkway, does that mean the two parts of the Eruv are not connected to each other?
No, they're all connected. They're all connected. The parkway goes over or under. Like over here, the parkway goes under. This is the Greenfield Bridge. The parkway goes under. I don't know why it's written on a map like this. Doesn't make sense. Here it looks like the Greenfield Bridge just goes over the ramp and not over the parkway, but it goes over the parkway.
I just uploaded pictures.
Where are they?
Lucky on the bridge.
If you want to wait for one more second, you'll see this lechi under the bridge.
No?
Yeah, that was it.
And download this. Come download all of them.
Okay, this is a lechi under the bridge.
I have to share the screen. Share the screen. Back to here. Share screen. No?
Okay. Okay. No.
That's under
Okay, this is the lechi under the new Fern Hollow Bridge. This is the lechi that we have under the new Fern Hollow Bridge. Goes right down from the ground up there. Because the thing is more than 4 amas.
thought I put it.
Oh,
Okay, then.
what was that? What was that? Graffiti. What is this? This is it.
This is the old bucket. Oh, that's fine.